Just to say, I have a very large dog just here. She's meant to be there. She's very old, so she gets treated very differently to every other animal in the house, in the fact that she's just allowed to come and do what she wants. But usually she just quietly goes over there, and just as I'm coming in, she was like, no, I'm going to do the most athletic thing I've done in 3 years. I'm just going to throw myself from the couch and then just wander around aimlessly, which is what she'll do. So I apologise if you can hear like padding, or you see Pete just run in and just put the dog on the couch. I'm just going to put that out there now. Hi everybody, so nice to meet a lot of you the other day when I came down to Newcastle. Thank you for all the support. It was amazing having the support. It was terrifying, breathtakingly, shockingly terrifying to actually do the show, but thank you for all of you crime fans. You made it possible and you didn't heckle me off stage, so it went a lot better than I had anticipated, as there were visions of me either collapsing and needing immediately to be given a defibrillator, or alternatively just being jeered, or as my brother said, because my brother comes with me, one of those old style kind of, you know, the shepherdess crook where they just put it around your neck and drag you off. That kind of Stanley and Laurel, or Laurel and Hardley. Stanley and Laurel. Stanley and Laurel. It's a new double act, did you know? Just created it. But Laurel and Hardy. So it went better. But thank you for all the support and all the lovely messages afterwards. And yes, I have a cold as well. It's just carried on. I think now whenever I see people, I just get a cold. Is it just me? I don't think it's just me, is it? I just have a perpetual sniffle. Fortunately, brandy cures everything. Unless, of course, you have alcohol issues, in which case, avoid. And that is true, as being honest. So let's get on with this. Hope you're okay. Like I said, big thanks to all of you. Dog's here, just getting in the way, but never mind. And there's going to be heavy breathing, and it isn't me. Okay? Just know that. It's not me. Emma, I messaged you about 2 years ago, distraught. Lost my 18-year-old, was suicidal, self-harming, and an inpatient at the very worst of NHS facilities. Last weekend she moved to Aberdeen. Today she starts her uni life as a student paramedic. I can't tell you how proud I am and what a journey. A wee bit of hope from a mummy who never thought we'd get here. Thank you for your honesty and for being human above all else. Forget all of that. Forget every bit about me. Like nothing that I have said or done compared to what you have done as a parent has any impact on what you've created there. That's down to you, it's down to love, it's down to care, it's down to her fighting, it's down to all those things. Like, you don't give me any of that power, you know, that's all about you. Thank you so much though for letting me know. I just want to know what she's doing now. Let me know what she's doing. Let me know what she's studying apart from the paramedic. What's she going to do? Live with a group of friends, or is she in halls of residence? Or how is her mental health? Like, is it really good now? Is she still struggling? Has she got support? Because of course, if she's training in paramedics, there's likelihood that there'll be like loads of resources available, because honestly, universities and so on and so forth tend to have really amazing kind of resources in that way. So I'm dead excited about that now. I didn't know that was going to come up. So thank you. Everyone who's listening is going to be like, that's a brilliant way to start the session. Doesn't that just prove something? I often think that, don't get me wrong, we've all been on a journey, haven't we? I think everyone's mental health has suffered really badly in the past 18 months. And certainly mine was suffering because of what had happened before that with my dad. And a lot of us are going through those journeys, aren't we? And it's still happening. Like, let's be honest, it's still happening. There's lots and lots of issues still going on. And the thing about young people is that young people's developing brains have been really affected by so many things, haven't they, of late? And I think that we're even more acutely aware of how challenging it is for young people. And as a parent, your happiness is inextricably linked to your children's. We all know that. We all know that. Our happiness, no matter how old they are, is inextricably linked. You just cannot separate it. You don't want to, but that means that you're going to always have that pain when they feel pain. So as a parent to another parent, just hearing that you've been through that abundance of pain, and she hasn't just come through it, she's then decided to devote herself to caring. See, that's always the irony, isn't it, with mental health? Whenever I work with people who have been mentally unwell or are struggling or have had big issues in life, what we get to at the root of it often is just this core of compassion, like this central nucleus of real kindness and sensitivity and a desire to be something and someone of purpose. And when you find that and you know how to place it somewhere, you don't feel as lonely anymore. But for a long time, the world hits you and bumps you and causes you to fall on your face, and you take it really personally and really sensitively, and it's really painful. And then when you identify that part of you, that central part of you, that, yeah, can feel lonely at times, but actually that's because it's just teaching you what purpose is. That's why it's there. It's like, okay, this doesn't feel okay, this doesn't feel okay, like, this does feel okay. Suddenly, all of that feeling has somewhere to go. And it sounds like your daughter, as much as she's got all that sensitivity and stuff, that's what she's done. She's gone, okay, I can do something with this. I can do something really positive with this. And that separates a vocation from a job. So I have a vocation, don't have a job. A job to me is something that somebody else maybe gives me and that I choose to do. Don't get me wrong, you can have a vocation where somebody gives you a job. But what I'm saying is the vocation is more than just this is what I do to earn money. It's about your core centre of being and meaning. It's about finding your purpose. And sometimes that, genuinely, with respect, is like my mum used to have when she worked in a shop. She had such a purpose. She loved that 5 hours every single day. She didn't want a different job. That for her was meeting people, getting to know everyone in the local area. It was her core purpose. Do you know what I mean? So it's not about big, massive things necessarily. And for anybody listening, you find your purpose where you fit, but just always seek it, because that's often what's at that central core of feeling so lost, so anchorless, so without foundation. But thank you, that's an amazing start, and thank you for sharing that. I feel really excited. Do you know anything about borderline personality disorder? I got diagnosed with it and I'm really struggling to understand it. Yes, I do, and I completely understand why. Because when you get a diagnosis, it's almost impossible that you fit all of it, number one. Number two, borderline personality disorder, think about it. It's like, borderline personality, borderline, what does that mean? Or EUPD, sometimes emotionally unstable personality disorder. You're like, oh, that sounds pretty human sometimes, doesn't it? Like, on some days, a lot of us feel a little bit extreme in our emotions. Sometimes we say and do things that we find regretful. Sometimes we act with spontaneity when we think on reflection we might or should not have. So when we look at BPD, when you've been properly diagnosed, so I would assume you've seen a psychiatrist, they've assessed you properly, you're hopefully under the care of a clinical psychologist, or you're getting some kind of support. It's hard to understand, because when you look at the list of symptoms and issues, well, it's expansive. It's really expansive. And it might only be certain elements of it that really impact on you. So what would I tell you my understanding of working with BPD is? First of all, do I think that BPD is this fixed term experience where that's it? You're BPD. Personally, I was going to say, personally, before somebody jumps down my throat and tells me that I shouldn't have an opinion, just personally, I do not think it's fixed. Personally, and in experience, I believe that BPD is often highly linked to trauma. Usually childhood trauma. And when we are developing and our brain is developing and our emotional cogency is developing, a child has very little control in the world. And because of that, and it's not always that people with BPD can relate to trauma. I'm just giving you what you said my understanding was. When you've been through that and you don't have a lot of control and bad things happen that you don't have the power over, often it can mean that we respond and react in ways that to other people might seem really extreme, right? Or really defensive, or really aggressive, or totally spontaneous, or in other people's opinions, dangerous. all of these things, right? Because to some degree, we had to learn as a child a vocabulary of emotion that we should never have had to learn and we didn't have the means to cope with. It's a bit like the child to some degree is still driving the car but hasn't quite got the license to do so in that moment at times. So when dealing with situations of challenge or relationships, it becomes quite difficult at times to manage. And, you might find that you're quite extreme around certain people, or you feel really hurt very easily, or your behaviour puts you at risk. Sometimes it may not. It may be that some people find you to be an individual that they struggle around because there's just something about your behaviour that to them feels a little bit challenging, right? All these things go on, but these are also borderline. You call it borderline personality disorder for that reason, really, because a lot of us can fit into those areas, can't we, at certain points? But what I would say to you about BPD, personally, is that I think with a great therapist, like particularly things like schema therapy, which is pretty much designed to help BPD, and again, with a very qualified practitioner, and that's not to say that there won't be practitioners out there who have got schema therapy who are fantastic. I'm just saying that if I'm going to advise it, I'm going to advise that you look at somebody who's got real class qualifications and, good history. And even though it won't be free, obviously, because it's a specific kind of therapy, I think that it can really help. And the thing is, when you're given a classification of anything, it's a bit like when somebody is told, you have a back injury, you're never going to be able to do this, this and this. And they go, okay. And they never do this and this again. And then another person gets told, you've got a back injury. You do this, this and this. And they're like, no, I'm going to do that, that and that. And that person goes on to climb mountains and just strengthens the very area they were told would never be healed. The way that we perceive our world, the way we have an attitude towards our experience is powerful. Just because you are classified as a certain thing does not mean that you cannot be within transition. It does not mean that you are fixed. And it certainly, particularly with BPD, does not mean that you are hopeless or helpless or can't heal in ways that make your life easier. But sometimes there is some investment required. And that can be really challenging. And it's unfair. It's unfair that some people can afford and some people can't, but you might be able to get people who are training in things like schema therapy, who may be able to take you on at a reduced rate and things like that. So there's always a plan, isn't there? There's always a plan B, C, D, and E. So the reason that it's quite hard to say what BPD is because it's a vast, wide area, really, when you start looking at the individual issues within it. It's more, what's my story? What formed me? Like, when I think about the word trauma, can I relate to that? Could it be that some of those experiences that have impacted on me have also impacted on my reactions to the world around me? To ask yourself those questions and to try to work on that self-esteem as well, because a lot of people with BPD have quite low levels of self-esteem. They don't find themselves very lovable, likable even. Sometimes in relationships they feel that the person doesn't understand their needs, and then to some degree they lose that person because they can't deal with the fact that the reassurance that's required to remain in the relationship is just going to be more than other people might require, or the fact that sometimes spontaneity can cause an issue for a partner that for the individual BPD they can't help it. It's just a reaction to a certain feeling because there are these extremes. And like I said, when you work through trauma, often you diffuse to some degree the inception of that experience. So I would look at those kind of things, and you are more than a classification. One person's experience of depression versus another person's will be different. It's the same with every single thing. So just remember that. Never lose the self in a diagnosis. You are still you. You are unique. There is only you like this. And when you have a classification, it does not define you. It educates you. It gives you information that can be useful. You can find out more about BPD by going online and reading about it, getting some self-help books on it, looking at schema therapy. It is just an information point. It is the start, not the finish. You understand? It's the start. It's like, oh, right, okay. So this psychiatrist thinks that I have BPD. right, how do I inform myself now about what they think this condition is, about the kind of help books that are out there that other people have experienced? How do I find communities who understand me? And then how do I take all of that information and move forward with my life, thus it being a great experience finding this out? Because I think what happens a great many times with people who are given a diagnosis of BPD or EUPD in particular is it feels like, wow, I'm really overwhelmed. That means I'm this, this, or this. And it's just not true. It's just a point of information, and from there, education. So explore it and don't be afraid of it. And like I said, I would look up schema therapy. Bit biased, but I'm just going to say that. Random, I know, but really don't know who to ask. So for the last couple of nights, I've been having really awful dreams, nightmares. The other night I had a dream that I was drowning. Really weird, I know, not weird at all. Then last night I had a dream, an awful dream that I can't stop thinking about now all day. I had a dream that a blonde-haired girl died in my arms. I could see her laboured breathing, and then she went. And she just sat up, and then she died again. Brackets, I must sound like a right freak. Mate, you should have seen my dream last night. Seriously. I am talking, if only I could write my dreams down, I would have trilogies. Also, last night, just so you're aware, I was lecturing the Prime Minister of New Zealand for like a good 30 minutes in my dream. I know you have like 1,000 thoughts a second in a dream, but the point is, good 30 minutes of my dream, there I was lecturing her. You know, dreams are there for that reason. So she sits up and dies again, and I never dream, but the last couple of nights I have, and they're not been nice dreams at all. I read up online, but it doesn't say much. I'm really not sure what to believe. I just thought I'd ask you, see if you had an experience with anyone that you've helped with bad dreams. Well, I find dreams, bad and good, wonderful. So I'm a bit of a Jung believer. So Carl Jung is just somebody that I connect with over dreams and dream theory, and there are lots of different ideas. But this is the one that I'm going to go for. So what I tend to go for is that you are everything in your dream. So don't go online and be like, what does this mean? Because it's like, you dreamt of a dog, therefore you will win money. You know, it's just ridiculous. The only one I think online that ever I've come across that I think is probably connected, and I think most people agree off universally, is like the teeth, where teeth are falling out. By the way, don't take that question off, so I'm going to go through it just so that you know, Pete. So where teeth are falling out, that's a classic stress dream, right? And we can all see that. And when we say stress and teeth are falling out, you kind of think about the fact that, well, we could be stressed because we're aging, so beauty. We can be stressed because we can't feel our teeth together. We can feel that we're losing something. But, you know, I can kind of see that online, they kind of get that, in my opinion, correctly. So 1, drowning. Well, drowning. Just think about the word of it. What does it say to you? So to me, if you're drowning, if you're everything in that dream in particular, you know, the water, you're the individual, you're the landscape around it, you know, it's very consuming, isn't it? So I would say, first of all, you're probably feeling overwhelmed, almost to a degree where you feel a bit suffocated. And so the brain is offering you an insight into your feelings through this incredible imagery, which is that you are losing a part of yourself because you're not caring potentially about the whole you. So the drowning is like a representation of just how overwhelmed you feel. And not just overwhelmed. When you drown, you internalize water, don't you? So you swallow it down. That's what kills you, right? So are you choosing not to explore and explain? That got into 2 words into one there. It's like explain. Are you not actually vocalizing the way that you feel? You have done here in writing, but are you actually exploring that? Are you pushing that out there? Are you letting the world know? Because often that's what that is telling you to do, because you're internalizing. So that's one way of looking at it. The second is the blonde-haired girl in your arms. She's dying, then she sits up, and then she dies again, right? So again, think about it, gasping for air. Where's the room here? To me, the representation of the child in your arms dying is a part of yourself that you are either not caring for or that you are actively trying to protect, but it's still getting harmed. There's still a part of you being harmed. And as it's you cradling the self, it would suggest that you are either the person responsible for inflicting the pain, i.e. you're not soothing yourself, or you're feeling defensive of letting anyone else in, to the point where you almost let the bit of need, the child in this representation trying to breathe, and she dies because she doesn't get what she needs. So what part of you are you just abandoning? What part of you are you not allowing to breathe? Because both of those dreams are very connected, aren't they? In my opinion. And if you can kind of analyze dreams that way, instead of them being these horrible things, we can often get great insight from them. And obviously it's very different for people who have the horrific night terrors and paralysis and stuff, but that's not what you're talking about here. You're talking about some very clear representations emotionally here, in my opinion. Hi Emma, I'm messaging for advice on how to deal with grief. Today, September the 10th, my lovely dog Murphy had to be put to sleep due to an illness. It hurts so much, even though it was the kindest thing to do for him. How can I start to deal with losing him? First of all, it's really awful losing your dog. I'm not going to pretend, because I've lost, one of my dogs in the past year, and it's just been awful. It's really hard. It's like your family, and also you feel like you're doing the right thing. In my case, it wasn't like that, but you were doing the absolute right thing massively to take that animal of yours, your family member, and to not mean that they're in pain anymore. I mean, God, why can't we do that? I just don't get it. Do any of you? I don't get it. It's like if I'm in loads of agony, the kindest thing that I would want is for somebody to come and give me an opportunity to just be at peace. That's it. Next journey, thanks very much. Don't need any of that pain. And that's what you've done. So on one level, it's like a really compassionate, well done, because you've made a really hard choice, but you did it because love is what motivated you. And your dog is incredibly lucky. Simple as that. Incredibly lucky. Secondly, it's not gonna heal quickly, is it? I mean, you had years with your beautiful dog, and the idea that it's not real grief, which does my head in and makes me want to physically get quite nasty with people sometimes when they're like, it's just an animal. You're just like, oh, what's it? Are they just your eyes? Or just remove them from your face? But that kind of reality is that you've absolutely lost a family member and invested all those years with that family member, and you feel very parental over your baby, dogs and cats. You're very parental because you've been a guardian, haven't you? I know that they've been guardians to us, but you have been a guardian. And I understand that if you're not a dog or a cat or an animal lover, that's fine, and you won't get this. And it'll be like, what do you mean? Why is she being like this? This sounds like how you describe the loss of a friend or a loss of a parent. And it's like, yeah, I am describing it in that way because literally the people who have animals that they're profoundly connected to, 1 minute it's there, the next minute it's just disappeared. And you're with them all the time that you're in the house. It's like a really intensive relationship, and it's connecting that. So you're going to need to go through this grief process, and it's going to take you some time, and it's never going to go away. And I'm not going to pretend it is. It's just going to get used to the pain that you bear. That's what will happen. So you'll get used to the pain, which doesn't make it easier, as in I could lie and say, we'll get over it. But that's awful, and it's not true. And it would mean that I was a liar. So instead I'm going to say to you, you're going to get used to the pain, but you're never going to lose it, because that beautiful, beautiful relationship, that is special, and it's going to get held in a special place in your heart, and it's going to be encompassed in pain. But that pain, as you know, is love in disguise. And over the years, that pain will become something so normal to you that it's second nature to be able to remember that beautiful relationship tinged with pain without the intensity which you've got at the moment, okay? And the other thing is, and I always say this, and it sounds really glib, and I don't want to be, but honestly, there's going to be a moment where you think about the potential, not now, but of having another animal. Never has there been more of a need. I'm not angry with people who went out and got dogs and cats over lockdown. I understand. But the result is catastrophic. The result is catastrophic. You know, not every rescue centre keeps animals alive, you know? There aren't the resources. And as much as people desperately needed something to cling on to in the last 18 months, they're filling up. So you won't be ready yet, but at some point, I'd like you to take every bit of that love and give it a new direction. It's not going to betray your beautiful baby. It's not going to betray it, but it is going to give you an incentive to direct it elsewhere as well. And a heart full of love for an animal, it will never feel full properly until it kind of has somewhere else to go. That's what people say as well to me. I remember when my dad died, people wrote and said, grief is love with no direction. It makes sense. So I think direction is important, but also just want to send you a big hug. It's really hard, and you'll be okay. You've just bizarrely got this DNA like I have. We all have. It's horrible when you lose, and you can't imagine life ever going back to normal. And it doesn't go back to normal. It goes back to a different type of normal. But you can't quite believe that you even survived. But it's just in our ancestry, isn't it? It's what we've always done and what we'll always do. And every bruise, I think, and every break just tends to make you a nicer person, as long as you don't make it make you bitter or resentful, and you certainly don't sound like that. Emma, I saw you power walking up Totty Road last week. I was power walking. I so wanted to give you a big hug. Why didn't you give me a big hug? I'm obsessed with big hugs. Ask anybody who came to watch me. I wanted to give you a big hug and thank you for keeping us sane, being true to yourself and your values and making them known. Even if you're shot down for it, I have a lot of bullet holes. But I didn't want to look like a crazy fan. You would not look like a crazy fan. Secondly, you would be like a neighbour because you live in my area. Therefore, you cannot be a crazy fan when you actually are my neighbour. On top of that, that day, I'd met after the night, went to Newcastle, did the show. Honestly, Newcastle, I do actually think it might be the friendliest place in the world. Just going to put it out there. Also, wow, on a Thursday night, loyal partiers, loyal. Like, I went and walked back from the actual venue to the hotel and I saw like club gear that I have not seen for a long time. And I'm pretty sure some of the kids were about 13, but I was very impressed. I mean, they were outfits that looked like they'd got some tights and just wrapped them round. But I was deeply impressed. And oh my God, the people, obviously people who came to see me weren't just from Newcastle, but the people of Newcastle don't even know where to begin. Friendliest hotel staff, just friendly people. Like, I mean, I thought that we were friendly here. I now look around and I'm not that friendly at all. Well, Newcastle, that has definitely got the award for everyone was really nice and happy. It was just brilliant. And then the next day, I went and met Professor Sean Holt. I'll tell you about another time. He's got an amazing book on depression and lots of other things. Cannabis as well, interestingly enough, which has really helped to kind of shift some of my ideas and ideals. So I'd met him because I'd wanted to meet him. It was really important that I did meet him. He's locked out of his home country, unfortunately, till January. But I wanted to see him because he's just so mind-blowingly brilliant. And after I'd had a conversation with him and I'd done the night before, I'd met all my ace people in Newcastle and people who come to watch the show. You know when you just need to walk? So I walked from Bury, which none of you will get, but Bury to Totty. I'd gone to Raconto's, actually. They did quite a nice vegan menu there, Raconto's, and I'd walk back and I was power walking and I was chatting away, but you could have stopped me. And if you ever see me again, do that. I will not know if you do or not, but just do it, because anybody will tell you, honestly, you get it if you get to meet me, that like, I'm not any different to this. ever. I could put on Twitter that I went to drink in Ramsbottom. Again, if you're from Tossie, you'll know what I mean. Drink in Ramsbottom, walked in, the girl went, no masks! And we just flung our arms around each other because, you know, she's really struggled with it. But wow, some of the stuff on Twitter, oh, made up story, have you? Yeah, my life's that dull. Yeah, that's right, that's what I did. Yeah, I made up the story. Yeah, I thought, oh, how can I really annoy people? Oh, all right, I hugged somebody in a cafe. So yes, next time, come and do that. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? There's somebody would even, how does that thought, I just ask yourself that question, how does that thought ever come into your mind? Like, oh my God, I don't know why I'm doing that accent. Oh my God, Emma Kenny has said she's hugged a waitress. I mean, that is the stuff of myths. Of myths. Stuff like that never happens where a human being actually likes another human being and celebrates a moment with them. No, that could never happen. I'm going to write that to her. I'm going to send it. I'm going to include her in it as well, just so she knows. Just so she knows! Sorry, guys. Just like, let's get on with this. Hello, Emma. Sorry, I just find it really ridiculous. Like, genuinely. Look up Ricky Gervais on Twitter and you'll get what I mean, but it's just what reminds me of it, honestly, every time. Hello, Emma. It's fine to have differing opinions, right? But in my day, it was just called being human, and ideally having a respectful attitude towards one another just went with the territory. And you know, there was always that really bitchy group of people, you know? Even they didn't include you in the bitching. Like, just like bitching etiquette. Just like when you bitch about me, just do it away from including me. That's all I ask. Bitch away. Make stuff up about me. Do what you like, kids. Just don't put me in it. It's really weird. It's like, oh, I really want her to know I'm not a very nice person. Like, why? Just like, go and be with your friends. Hello, Emma. My 13-year-old daughter has developed acute anxiety over the summer, causing her to vomit in public. Oh. And this is making her even worse being out and at school. Do you have any advice on how to get help for her? She's a happy girl at home, has been doing very well at school, has a few lovely friends, but it's affecting her way of life on a daily basis now. Thank you so much. So first of all, like, I think that's really clear regarding the acute suffering and stress that so many young people have experienced in the past 18 months. Our kids have really been through the mill. She's 13, like 18 months of her life. Just, do you remember when the summer holidays when you were kids used to feel like 103 years? Remember, I do. They stretched on. They were endless. You'd put your blazer or your bag, whatever else that you had from school away, and you'd just like have this volume of space. And even though we've filled it with technology more and kids are more interactive and connected and stuff, still time is not the same for them as it is for us. Adults, we've got these responsibilities, we've got jobs, we've got all these other ideas and multifaceted needs that we're kind of meeting, right? Young people haven't. And at 13, you're talking about quite a big portion of her life has been basically stolen. And we can use different words, protected, whatever you want. I don't have an issue with however somebody chooses to see that time. I'm just saying, it got nicked for whatever reason. And on top of that, there's been this constant trauma, hasn't there? I mean, if you've got a sensitive disposition, you know, temperament is something we're born with. So it sounds like your daughter's got quite a sensitive temperament, which is lovely. It means that she's going to be dead compassionate and empathic, and she's going to be kind, and she's obviously academic, because you say she does really well at school. And again, when you have a more sensitive temperament, you often are more academic. So there are lots of really big positives, right? But it also means that she'll seep in and swallow some of that traumatizing material that's been very present. And imagine being a child and you're just coming a teenager and you've got all these hormones arriving and like wanting to kind of fit in, and this massive mess that kind of occurs. And then this pandemic arrives. Doesn't matter what people's views are on the pandemic. As far as you are concerned as a kid, this is something that is big enough and serious enough to shut down your school. See it from the child's perspective, not from the adult's perspective. Like people like me and you, we can all go out of our way, can't we, to read lots of different papers and come to different scientific belief systems and agree or disagree and become terrified or be desensitized or somewhere in between. We have the power to do that, but kids kind of don't really do that. You know, they're too busy doing their academic work and they're too busy being young people. And then like suddenly they're dealing with something really serious enough to close the country down. Wow, I mean, just think about what you'd have been like when you were a kid. I mean, for most of us, we don't do the child-centric perspective, do we? We just don't do it. But if we allow ourselves just for a fleeting moment to go, oh my God, how would I have felt? And actually, it's a really good question to ask yourself anyway, because often we don't stop and just give ourselves a moment to recalibrate what we've been through, how we feel. When somebody said about me getting shot so many times, it's like, it's true. And acknowledging those wounds, because there have been quite painful ones, and the losses. If I don't do that, then I'm not going to be able to manage the anxiety that's provoked by that, and I'm not going to be able to voice that. And I think we all have to do that. And so your daughter needs a place and a space to do that. And everybody, all of you listening, need that as well, just to decompress. But when it comes down to a 13-year-old, what can you do? So, first of all, when she's feeling sick, you know why that is. It's an over experience of cortisol and adrenaline. So it's basically that horrible feeling that you get when something feels like dread, yeah? Very physical, really physical feeling. And for her, that obviously results in nauseousness, which is completely normal. So we have to work on reducing her adrenaline cortisol level. That's it, right? There's a few things that we can do. So the first off is if school has got a pastoral system, sometimes they have like youth workers or mentors. My youngest son had Mr. Kell. My youngest son never spoke to Mr. Kell about the actual issues that had happened, but Mr. Kell always turned up to ask him how he was and just say hi, and that mattered. But it might be for your daughter that there's somebody at school who can be a key point of contact. Secondly, whenever I used to work with anxiety in schools with young people, and I used to work with the actual teachers and head teachers, this wasn't a big area of my work. When I first started my work and I worked for the local authority in Bury, one of the things that I used to ask them to do was to create a quiet space. And what it would be is for kids who have problems to do with school refusing. I mean, some were genuinely school phobic and some had issues around high anxiety, more so these days than ever, I guess. That's what's being experienced. I would encourage the school to allow that young person to have a sense of control. Now, that control was very simple, and actually my own niece, it was something that we instituted with her at her school when she started to have panic attacks. And the reason that we did that was because the teacher be aware that when she actually got up and left the classroom, it's because she needed some space to just deal with it, right? And we created that opportunity so that she had a space and a place to manage that feeling that you're talking about, that building up. So I think speak to school, get them to agree that if she feels like she needs some time out, that she can have that, and agree a place and a space that feels comfortable for her to do that in. It might just be going and sitting on the loo for 5 minutes, genuinely, just sitting there quietly. It might be that there's a special room that she can go to, like a sick room, but just give her control, i.e. when you feel this level of panic, it's okay. There's somewhere really just for you to go and just chill for a bit, because then she's in control. She's not worrying about that. She's not anticipatorily getting stressed. Secondly, meditation. It doesn't matter that she's 13, she can do meditation any day of the week with you. My YouTube Wellbeing has got loads of meditation. It's even got young people's meditation. So please feel free to head over there, but there'll be loads of streams online. There'll be loads of great people. Some people like ASMR, for example, and absolutely find that amazing. And some young people love it. It's not for me, but wow, I can tell you now that for some people, ASMR is like massively life-changing. But also anchoring. I talk about this constantly on my lives. Anchoring is what we can all do for our anxiety. So I would arguably say if she's 13, you want to get either like a pebble that you can find with her, a stone, or something really significant that you can carry around with her in a pocket. And you get her to really kind of concentrate when she's holding this particular object. Get her to concentrate on really good memories. Like, I want you to tell her to think about the happiest memory that she's got. I don't know what that'll be. It could be like Christmas. It could be when you bought her a particular present. It could be a birthday that she remembers. It could be just a big, tight, warm squeeze of a hug that you give her. I want you to really get her to concentrate on when she's thinking about that particular feeling. Just get her to volumize it. And then you can get her to carry that around with her. And whenever she's starting to have those feelings, get that out and just like really concentrate on those feelings, really volumize them. As I've mentioned before, you can even use things like peppermint or albus oil or a smell that you can also anchor. So like while she's feeling that, she can be smelling something so that it's creating this real connection with relaxation. Teach her the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can touch, 2 things I can taste, 1 thing, I don't know, whatever, just 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Anything that you can kind of get her to distract from that moment, get her to just really connect with the present. Those are really helpful. And then breathing exercises. I still get accused of always saying diaphragmatic breathing by people. Oh my God. Oh, she's saying that like a really effective technique for anxiety. Again, like you'd think that she'd invent some more really effective techniques. I don't invent any more because it's really effective. It's like really effective. It's like when I want to paint a room white, I don't go, maybe I'll try a tan colour. That'll be effective. No, it won't. It won't be effective at all. So diaphragmatic breathing. Young people, if you can get to do the box breath, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Get her to do that for at least 10 minutes. First of all, she'll be like, it's not working. Just ignore her, remind her it is working. It just takes some time to get hold of, but that will help to reduce those feelings. Also, get her to practice some gratitude, 3 things that she's really grateful for in the day before she goes to bed, and 1 thing she struggled with but learned from, right? And also, if she's a bright little button, which she sounds like she is, journaling can really help. Everyone should journal. You'll see me when I'm doing my little bits of journaling sometimes, because I'll sometimes put some on Insta. I just put little snippets of what I'm writing about, and I'll put it out there just to share a tiny bit of my journey, but really it's me just sharing with me. So get her to do that. They're all things. And of course, if you feel that her needs are bigger than you can manage and that school can manage, get her on the waiting list for CAMS. It's going to take a good 1.5 years, probably, minimum, before she gets seen. Even if she doesn't need it by that point, let's just imagine she doesn't. Let's imagine over the next few months it just dissipates and she feels better. Doesn't matter, because that referral's there. If you don't take it in the end, somebody else will get moved up and it doesn't matter. But just don't feel like you're alone. And the reason I've gone on quite a lot about that one is because I think anxiety per se, whether we're dealing with a young person who's struggling with vomiting or a young person who's dealing with depression, or any of us here at home who are dealing with our own anxieties and stressors, they're all relevant. Every single one of those things I've just said is relevant. They will all help you on your way, along with making sure that you're taking things like vitamin D. And as Professor Sean Holt said to me the other day, apparently just a general basic multivitamin is what he really recommends. And I was like, I take quite a lot of different things like zinc, magnesium, etc. But apparently a multivitamin, and I was thinking, yeah, when I was pregnant, that's what I did. Took like a multivitamin and folic acid, of course. You lived on folic acid, didn't you, when you were pregnant? If you haven't had a baby or you're a man listening to this, it won't actually register. But there's like an urgency. You don't realise when you get pregnant, there's an urgency. It's like the first 3 months, take folic acid. You don't even know why you're doing it. You're just doing it because they've told you to do it. And I definitely did it. I'm extremely unhappy in my relationship. I project to everyone else I'm happy, but I'm really not happy at all. I'm made to feel guilty all the time if I do something for myself, which isn't often. I can't bring myself to sleep with him or touch him. We're due to get married next year sometime, and the very thought of it frightens me, but I'm petrified of being on my own with the children. I also know I won't ever find anyone else because I don't feel worthy, and have children already who I love dearly. I feel so beaten down right now, would not rather be here. It would be the easier way. I've felt like this for years. I don't know what to do and I have nowhere to turn. Please, can you help me? Honestly, this is gonna like not in any way, shape, or form dismiss your feelings. Please don't hear it that way. And I feel like I have to say it before I say something like this. But what you are experiencing is unbelievably common, but it just doesn't feel it when you're in that space. It feels overwhelming, terrifying, you feel suffocated, and you feel utterly stuck. You just cannot imagine ever changing. So the consequence is that you just build up the fear and the resentment and all those things that go with it. But if you are not in love with your partner, if you're not happy in the relationship, if you constantly feel put down, if your self-esteem is on the floor because you're not allowed a life of your own separate to them, and you really don't want to be with them, then the hardest bit is the decision. Once the decision is clear, the doing becomes effortless. It's an old rune expression that. Once the decision is clear, the doing becomes effortless. And it's true. Like, for some people, like me, it was easy because my ex had an affair. So it gave me a very clear definition of, this is the end, this is my new beginning. And it was scary, and it was overwhelming. And being a single parent, it's very challenging financially on lots of levels. There are all these things, I agree, are difficult. But you know what? On no level have I met anybody ever who has said to me, really glad I stayed in that less than average stroke bad stroke fundamentally broken relationship. Never. I've never had anyone go, well, it was miles easier being unhappy there. It's always okay. There were obstacles, I had to manage financial issues, there were hurdles that I never thought I was going to come across. At times it was exhausting, but my gosh, being on my own with my kids compared to being in a really bad relationship is just wonderful. The peace compared to that feeling you're describing. You know, the idea that you're never going to meet somebody again. Everybody feels like that. That's what people feel like. They're like, that's what traps you. And you're like, well, okay, let's just put that into context. Let's take the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario, you never meet anyone again. How can that possibly be worse than not liking being physically with the person that you're sharing your life with, not enjoying their company? Like, how can being by yourself with your kids and then watching them grow and then becoming a grandparent and all those things that are going to be amazing, how can that be a worst case scenario than being in this one? There are always going to be limitations. There are always going to be problems that you encounter, always. And that's day to day, every day, for the rest of our lives. We're all going to have it. But a life fully lived is a life fully loved. And you're living a strange life at the moment with someone that you just don't connect with. You can't, in my mind, marry them unless you do some real work. And if you can afford relate, that would be a really good way forward, because you can sit down and explain your feelings and you can explore them, and they can have a chance to some degree, I guess, to explore whether they can change or whether you can change or whether you can both synergize in a way that would make it work. But otherwise, moving out of that relationship and taking your children with you and allowing yourselves to co-parent is a really good place to be. And let's take the normal case scenario. This is the normal case scenario. You will absolutely, in the end, meet someone. Absolutely. When you're ready, when it's right, and then you won't accept less. You'll only accept what you deserve. Right now, you're accepting less, so you feel really unhappy. Partner is a reflection of you. If they're not giving you a sense of positive reflection, then you're not going to feel good about yourself. That's really important. So if you think about the big picture, you'd never do anything. You understand? I'll take an example, right? The other day, I don't even know how it happened, my youngest son said something about being a stuntman, which is what he wants to be. And believe me, a PhD times 2 is preferable to doing what you have to do to become a stuntman. It is insane. And I remember at one point he just said, well, maybe I should just forget about it, because there was this massive, overwhelming thing about the fact he doesn't want to do drama at college. he has to do drama as part of his stuntman stuff, and he was thinking about doing the A-level so that he could kind of do that, and he was like, all of a sudden he had that moment. And I said, if you think about the big picture, no one would do it, because it's insane. You know, you've got to be a brown belt minimum in karate. You've got to be an elite gymnast level in certain areas, trampolining level in certain areas. You've got to learn to ride a horse for 2 years and have evidence of it and be able to do tricks on it. Got to be able to deep sea dive. Got to be able to do tricks on motorbikes properly. Have been a racing driver for like 2 years professionally, or alternatively pay for like really expensive courses. Do at least 80 days on set. And the list goes on. Who would do that? Because if you think about the big picture, the overwhelming, I'm leaving my husband, you know, to be all of these issues I've got to face, we would all be static, because we're always afraid of the possibilities and the enormity of it. Instead, when we just go, we're going to make a decision, and we're going to make the decision that's right. And we're going to take with that all the problems and pitfalls and all of the joys and growth, and we're going to accept that we're only just going to do that one day at a time. You know, if any of you have ever seen something like Hacksaw Ridge, or what's it called, Pete? That amazing film.
Yeah, Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw. Ooh, I got it. Did I get that right?
You got it right, yeah.
My goodness. Join me shortly for my movie review show, Hacksaw Ridge. But there is this scene in it, and he just says to God, just one more God. It's all he thinks about is just one more God. That's what he says. It'll make sense if you watch it. I'm not going to tell you any more because I'll ruin it for you. But it's so powerful. He thinks about just one more. And if we just take the first step, and then we just take the second step, we climb the staircase. And then that staircase can be freaking enormous. And as long as you don't look back, you're not really thinking about all your achievements, and as long as you don't look ahead, you're not really thinking about all the things that you need to get done. You're just doing what needs to be done in the moment. And it's to say, when you've got the gas bill to pay, like back in the day when we used to pay gas bills without everything being automatic, you know, you actually had to pay them. You didn't think, oh my God, where's all the gas coming from? How do I get the gas sorted if the gas breaks down? You just went and paid the bill. I know I'm minimising it to a very simple thing, but that's what I'm saying. You just do it. You just pay the bill. You just accept the relationships at the end. You just accept the problems are going to be there and the pitfalls are going to occur, and you're going to be all right. And you're going to teach your kids that the best relationship is a happy, or at least a content relationship. We're not always happy in relationships, you know. Of course we're not. Sometimes it's just we live with them, and we decided that, you know, we're definitely not going to cut up their clothes, you know? That sense of it's not always perfect. But when you know that it isn't for you, then just accept that it's okay, and that you have permission to have a different life and a better life elsewhere, ideally in the end with somebody else. Do you want to move on, Pete? Pete's just sat here now, like he's got a massive list, and I just saw him looking at his phone, guys. Mm-hmm. He's looking at the messages and he's not concentrating on what I'm saying. So it's a 7 out of 10 for Peter tonight. Maybe a 6.5. No, don't owe me, young man. Hi Emma, I've followed you on Twitter for ages. Never really knew how to join in with your mental health clinics, but just saw you reply to someone asking to say Messenger was the best way. It is. Look, Pete's really good, but the only ones I tend to see a lot of the time are on Messenger. My husband suffers with anxiety, manifesting in being really quite unpleasant and mean-spirited and put in stressful situations. Oh my! Did I write this in? No disrespect, Pete. You're a lovely, lovely human being, but in stress. I don't know how long I can keep accepting the apologies for his belittling behaviour, and often leaves me in tears in public because he can be so humiliating and cruel. That's next level, that's not okay. The next day blames it on anxiety that he wasn't able to handle. Most recently, this was at a wedding where he was an usher. No designated job particularly, but just to wear a nice suit. Indeed it is. We had a couple therapy quite recently where she gave us good tools to manage this as I'd reached the end of my tether, and it tears our family apart. We have girls aged 11 and 8. After the therapy, we agreed not to separate and to work together to help to support one another. I too suffer with anxiety. However, After this last episode, which resulted in me and the girls leaving the wedding in tears, I don't think it's fair on the girls or myself living with the constant cloud hanging over us and forever feeling like we're walking on eggshells in case we say the wrong thing. What can I do? Anxiety is never an excuse for abusive behaviour. Ever. Stress, of course, is something that makes people feel fight, flight, freeze. But when it comes down to taking that feeling and then projecting it onto the person that we're meant to love and using words like humiliation, cruelty, belittling, that's very, very different from what we're talking about regarding I'm feeling anxious, I don't know what to do with this feeling, I'm going to snap at that person a little bit. I'm going to snap, I'm going to be like in a bad mood. For example, when I was going to the theatre, the whole day had just kind of gone a bit wrong, and my brother was driving, went to a safe place in the car because me and Pete, we were kind of like sniping at each other because I was like, "Argh," and he was like, "Argh," because like we were both really worried about how awful it was going to go and that I was just going to like die on stage of like fear and like make a fool of myself, right? So that kind of natural snipiness, and even then like it was like very minimal, and definitely both of us were like, oh, sorry, it's just like really just the way that we're feeling about this, we're projecting onto each other. That is very different than belittling and humiliating. You don't deserve that. Absolutely not. You're not doing that. You suffer from anxiety. When does anxiety make you a bitchy person? It's not a reaction to anxiety. That's a choice to make you feel terrible. And your daughters and you don't deserve to walk on eggshells. He has to do better. And if he can't do better, he'll have to take the consequences. And those consequences are you're not going to be able to live with him. And you have a right in your own home, and this is for all of you listening, you have a right in your own home to feel absolutely at peace. If the only place in this crazy world right now, the only place that you can breathe deeply and sigh out the stress is in your home. Even better, ideally, in your bed with your partner, where you're just like, well, am I in a Sims reality and I'm a really bad avatar and I'm just not putting my effort into the game? You know, that would definitely be me. That's what's meant to happen, right? That's not happening for you. You were at a wedding and you thought it was okay to humiliate and belittle you to the point where you took the kids and left. Now, listen, I also can say, this is one side, and I'm going to say this because I always try and balance things, right? Maybe you do have sensitivity issues. Maybe you are oversensitive. Maybe you hear him in a way that he's not meaning to express, right? And he doesn't get it because he grew up in a communication style where people shout at each other, because this is very key, this is very normal. People have massive communication difficulties. My husband grew up in no, it's probably not fair to say, he probably didn't grow up in a shouty family, but he had learned to kind of shout. I'm getting a yes, he did. He had shouty person, right? You know, so his voice is just like raised when it's not meant to be raised. And my mum will always go, oh, he's very loud, isn't he? It's got one of those voices, and she loves him to pieces. But what she's saying is like the volume is like always a little bit angsty. He doesn't get it. The fact that he doesn't get it isn't because he's a bad person, it's because his communication style has been formed in childhood and it hasn't been challenged until kind of in my family. And that was a real challenge for him. Because imagine being told, well, that's not acceptable. Stop that, change it. And although it's not perfect science, and he definitely still has moments, it's definitely different because there were consequences. There'll be consequences. I'm wondering whether your husband really understands the consequences. It sounds like you love him. It does. It sounds like he absolutely wants the relationship to work. He went to therapy with you. So that's a good thing. And it sounds like his communication style is not working for you. And it's not going to work for you. It is not going to work for you, that communication style. And there is probably a real need to go back to some therapy, because what you might want to do is to explore how your coping reactions are. So you take things potentially, this is all anecdotal, I don't know, I don't know your situation, I'm just throwing things out there, but let's just say it this way. Say you're a sensitive temperament, So actually, wow, when he says nasty stuff to you, like, personal, really hurts. Whereas to him, you might be able to say the most vile stuff, it'll just like bounce off him. But because he doesn't realise that you actually feel it, and because to him it's like so minimal, it's like, so what, I'm calling your name, so what, I'm making a fool of you, so deal with it. It's like no big deal, because his life has had experiences where that's kind of just been the way it is. We can often bring that baggage into our relationships, and it's good that you've got tools, but it feels like you're trying to use them, but he has somehow gone, I've got these tools, I'll just leave them at the door, because humiliation and belittling and cruelty are never acceptable in a relationship ever. So consequences are important, but he needs to understand that that's about to happen. So he needs to understand that those very flexible, elastic boundaries that you've allowed, they're going to snap. And then there won't be room for him. And the problem with really, my experience, and my personal experience, problem with really sensitive, loving, compassionate human beings is people really misunderstand. They think that they can get away with anything and that person will always forgive. And then they just go that little bit too far and it breaks. Because that person has quietly and sensitively accepted bad behaviour for a long period of time and warned that person and accepted the apologies again and again and again. But every single time when the apology doesn't come through, they've just given it a little bit more room, and then there's a point, and once that point is passed, there is no going back. So he won't get the option to return to you in the end, because you will remove him completely from your life in that way. So you're helping him if you tell him very clearly, this is not working for me. I don't feel happy. I'm not accepting the way that you speak to me anymore. I don't want to fight about it, but we have to either have some very clear rules and make sure that those rules are absolutely concrete. And it might be, I'm going to do a safe word, which is too loud, back off, whatever you decide on. And at that point, you make that decision that you've got some safety areas in your relationship where he realises, there's going to be consequences, which is that she's going to leave. Also, after all of that, if you've decided that you don't want to be with your husband anymore because you can't stand it, you do that. Every day of the week, you do that. Yes, Jono, hi! Just to say, Jono, who is nearly a Michelin star chef, keep saying that. Jono is a good example, actually. Hi, Jono's mum, Sandra. Oh, you were married to your dad for 39 years and tomorrow is 10 years since he passed away. Sandra, just want to say a massive hug to you, and also I'm so sorry that it's 10-year anniversary, but also, wow, 39 years. That's a really big celebration of time spent with somebody who no doubt adored you, and you created Jono, who's one of the nicest blokes I've ever met, to be honest. Jono is also, to anyone listening now, who says that you have a time limit on dreams, Jono is a really good example of how wrong that is. So when I met him a few times, but I met him when he came to the gig the other night, and he came to see Pete because Pete and him grew up together and good mates and all of that. And what I know of Jono is his Facebook, and all I see is the craft of chefery. I mean, Jono is like an unreal chef. I've not ate the food, but if it was art, I'd buy it. It's how beautiful it is. It is, utterly. Where's it that he goes? Where is it that he works? Chadwick's. Chadwick's in Maltby. Go. 6 years he's been a chef. He started when he was 31 and he's almost like a bloody cotton serviette away from a Michelin star. Find your purpose, just like Jono. It's never too late. To all of those with relationship issues, to all of those afraid, it's never too late. And when you find it, It makes life absolutely, fully, 100% worth living, always. See you soon, guys.